I want to start briefly by sort of pointing to sort of the landscape. A lot of our people in this network are baby boomers, and you grew up in a time when music was so special. And you know, back then when you bought an album, that was your weekend, and you'd lay down in bed with headphones, and you know, you listen to that record all day long and look at the liner notes, and you know, there wasn't 500 channels of television, there wasn't Xbox, you didn't have home theaters in your home, so you went out, and music was, for a lot of people, it was the default, and it was, you know, it was the touchstone of a couple of generations actually. And what's happening now is, as the whole music industry is shifting, the whole economy is shifting. And what's happening is people, in terms of entertainment, have more choices than ever. There are so many things to do, and music is just one of many things. And so with all these diversions, the crowds have to get smaller. The music audience has to get smaller. But on the other side, we have more talent than ever before. You have kids teaching themselves how to play by watching YouTube videos 8 hours a day. And by the age of 15, they've got the skills, maybe not always the taste, but they've got the skills that, you know, that used to take a lifetime to develop. And a lot of these artists are independent, and they want to go out there and find a way to make a living in this economy. And their lack of fame it's no indication of their talent. And so if we're going to have artists, all these artists competing for smaller and smaller audiences, we have to find a way for small shows to work. And the infrastructure that was built around the heyday of music, with 3,000-seat theaters and 300-seat folk rooms and 150-seat clubs, is now, it's an infrastructure that doesn't work for the size of audiences that we can attract, at least for most artists. And so, you know, we're always going to have the stadium shows. There's always going to be big things happening. But what's happening, similar to the middle class, there's less and less room for things to work at medium scale. It's either monstrous or small. Those are the only things that seem to work on a consistent basis. And so with the advent of house concerts, we've now created a way where the venue, the house, doesn't need to make a profit. They do it because they love it, because it means something to them to have this experience, to bring music into the home. So when you take the profit motive away, you know, half the money from the crowd is no longer going to the venue, it's all going to the artist. So now the artist can play for half as many people, right? And then with a house concert, you also take care, you get this excess capacity, oftentimes from empty nesters who have a 3-bedroom house with 2 empty bedrooms. And now the artist has a free place to stay, and the host, being a host, is going to offer meals as well as the bed. So now the artist has 2 of their biggest expenses taken care of on the road: a place to stay and a good meal. So this is really the skeleton of the power that house concerts provide in this new music industry, so to speak. And it's literally a cottage industry now. So it's a really, really powerful thing. And I came at this as an artist, in wonder, in awe of these generous people that had space, time, and the willpower to recruit friends to come to their house to listen to music they'd never heard of before, maybe based on a couple of YouTube videos that they shared or something like that. And I was just in awe. I was like, how do we find these people? How do we inspire more people to do this? And how do we connect them with talent? And what was really interesting for me is it took a long time, but story after story from hosts led me to understand that the hosts get as much out of this as the musicians do. And I'm a very sort of how-to, nuts and bolts kind of guy, and that's what most of this workshop is going to be. But I want to tell you a story up front about the story that really, really helped me understand what's really happening out there. I'm writing a book based on what I've learned over 10 years of running this community and playing shows and hosting shows. And I did a lot of interviews with artists and hosts in our network. And one of the interviews was with a man in Arkansas. And he was telling me, I was asking him, you know, what do you get out of this? What do you get out of this hobby? And he's like, Fran, I need to tell you a story. My wife was going into the hospital for surgery, and after the operation, the doctor told me that your wife is going to be chair-bound for the rest of her life. And I've seen this time and time again. They have a tendency to shrink from life. They don't want to go out because it's difficult. And he said, if you don't find a hobby for her, some way to keep her engaged, you're not going to have her very long. And he had read about house concerts and was inspired by the idea and said, you know what, instead of, if I can't take my wife out, I can bring the community in. And he obviously loves music, and he decided to do a house concert series, I think it's the first Tuesday of every month. And he lives in a rural town. People don't have a whole lot of money, but there's not a whole lot to do. And he's close to the interstate. So even in a small town, there's always great talent coming through. And so he started this monthly house concert series. And every month, his wife is there at the door greeting everybody that comes in. And it's the thing that she looks forward to every month. And it's, to me, that the power of the story, he echoed it. He said, Fran, house concerts are keeping my wife alive. And that, to me, was a major, major turning point in writing this book and saying, hold on, there's another story to be told here, because this isn't just about the artists. It's about people bringing their communities together. It's about people relearning how to appreciate music. As I mentioned before, a new album was your weekend. I mean, that was it. It wasn't background music at the gym. It wasn't, background music at the dentist's office or at the grocery store. It was, it was an event, and it was foreground music, not background music. And that is an experience that I think a lot of people are lacking these days. And when you start hosting house concerts, I know you've seen this, there are people who have this aha experience, like, I didn't know this was possible. I've been listening to music in loud, noisy places with distractions for so long, rude waitresses and bartenders, paying for parking, the hustle and bustle of going into town, sometimes having to drive far to get to the venue, and paying $100 or $200 to sit 100 rows back and watch it on the Jumbotron above the stage. So these little events are packing quite a punch in terms of a cultural movement. And it's wonderful to see at every house concert somebody else turns into a music fan again. They might have checked out for 10 years, 20 years, they go to one show a year, and now they start going to concerts several times a month, if not several times a week. And then some graduate to be like you, the super fans, and say, you know what, I'm not just going to go to these shows, I'm going to have them in my house. To me, that's a really powerful thing, and I hope that you feel a sense of that when you host your shows or when you attend shows. And what I want to do from my standpoint with Concerts in Your Home and actually the Listening Room Network is to sort of make sense of all this activity that's happening and allow house concerts to become the proving ground for artists that are developing, so that they can build an audience by playing house concerts when they're developing in a new market. If you live in Nashville and you're trying to play shows in Tampa Bay, if you go play a club your first time, you're lucky to get 15, 20 people there to see you play. And the club won't make any money, the artist doesn't make any money, and everybody's looking around at empty chairs. And so it does no good for venues and clubs out there to have these tiny little shows that just don't make sense for the space and on the financial level. So house concerts, rather than competing with clubs and venues, can actually be a wonderful source of audience building and building not only audience in general, but audience for particular artists who will have a chance to grow and eventually play that room once they've built their mailing list and have a full house and have a meaningful show where everybody's, wow, this is what everybody feels like it was a successful night. So these small opportunities, each is an opportunity for success. Whereas for the longest time, people have been brainwashed that the only thing that makes sense is big. I want to be bigger, 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 bigger. And what they do is they generally fail to achieve that time after time after time. So at the heart of what I think is important to share with people who are interested in house concerts is that they don't have to be big if you time them correctly. And so every artist out there who's on the road is not generally going to have any trouble filling their Friday nights and Saturday nights with a decent show. Where they struggle is to stay on the road Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday without losing money. And a lot of hosts, when they first experience a house concert, maybe perhaps right here with 40 or 50 people in the room, they get this mistaken notion that house concerts are for wealthy people or people with big houses. And if only I had a big space, if only I had hundreds and hundreds of friends, I could do this. And my message that I want to get to everybody out there is that you can do something really small and much, much easier than a big house concert and have an equal impact on the lives of really talented artists who are touring around the country or even around the world. Because this is really starting to take off in Europe as well. Like, things are just as challenging for artists around the world as they are here. So at the core of this idea, we came up with a concept called 10-10. And those 10-10 concerts means 10 songs for 10 or more guests. And the idea is if an artist is making their way from Atlanta to Miami, and they've got to get from there to there, let's say that they've got good gigs in Atlanta and good shows in Miami, they've got to get from there and they've got to come through here. We're in the Tampa Bay area. So the idea is they're going to lose money, certainly on gas, certainly on food, and they're going to lose a lot of time getting from one place to the other, because flying these days with a bunch of gear is almost impossible. So they're driving, and they've got to come through small towns, big towns that they might not have an audience in. And if a fan is willing to say, you know what, I will offer you lodging, I will offer you food, I will offer you 10 or more friends, each contributing $10 to $15 a piece, and potentially buying CDs, and you only have to play for an hour. And that can be a Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. You will be amazed at the number of artists who will take that deal. Yes, thank you very much. I was going to have to hole up in a crappy hotel to save money because I didn't make as much on Saturday as I'd hoped. And if I want this tour to provide for me, or heaven forbid, a family, I've got to be very economical and very smart about how I spend my days on the road. And that's why you see artists doing workshops in the daytime and shows at night. They have to stay busy on the road to make ends meet. So the 10-10 concept, it's 10 songs for 10 or more guests. And that means 10 is sort of a baseline. And it does a handful of things. Number one, it creates an achievable goal for a host. Number two, it creates a little bit of exclusivity. If you're trying to do 30 or 40 people in your home, the amount of work that most people have to do to accomplish that is quite Herculean. And just because you know 30 or 40 people doesn't mean you can get them all to come to your house on the same night, especially to hear an artist that they might not know. So it requires a lot of work to do that. And what happens is you start asking all your friends 3, 4, 5 times to come to the show. And what does that tell you about a show? If somebody keeps inviting you 3, 4, 5 times, it means they're having trouble selling tickets. They're having trouble, gaining an audience for the show. So how much fun can this thing be if I'm being begged to attend? So the 10-10 concept allows you to change that dynamic as a host and say, you know what? We're going to invite 200 people, but we're only going to take 10. And we're going to send a very strong message to our people that this is a really cool and fun thing. Because after 10 people, we'll start telling people, well, let me correct that. After 15 people, because you want to have a little bit of padding for the people who are going to cancel at the last minute. And you can, and if you wanted to actually have 15, you totally could, and you can take 20 RSVPs if you like. 10 is just the minimum. But we want you to set a target that you can hit. We want you to set an expectation with the artist so that they can be pleasantly surprised rather than slightly disappointed in the number of people that showed up. So the 10-10 format, even though I have 15 people, we call it a 10-10. Again, 10 is the minimum. So we get 15 people. The suggested donation is $10 to $15, and I ask people, be generous if you can, and some people are. And then because of the close proximity, because of the access, because of this remarkable connection when you play for a small crowd, the artists usually sell more CDs per capita than they do at any other type of show. And attendees will often buy one of everything. So I've seen artists make $350 at my apartment playing on a Monday night for 1 hour. And the 1 hour is one of the key things to this 10-10 idea, because if you want people to go out on a weeknight, what do you have to do? You have to make it easy. So you want to manage the expectations of the artist, get them to agree to something maybe a little less than you want or that you feel that you can provide. And that way you're giving yourself a little bit of room. You can still work as hard as you want to knock it out of the park and have a great crowd, but you want to minimize your chances of disappointing the artist or yourself. So the 10-10 allows you to invite as many people as you like, create a waiting list, and then start telling people, I'm sorry, we would have loved to have you. We will definitely do this again, but we're full for this show. And I will make sure you get invited first the next time we do this. And now the impression that you've made in the minds of your friends on your mailing list is totally different than you would have made if you had to ask them 4 or 5 times to come to the show. So, and I advise people who've been doing big shows for a really long time, at some point you reach a place where your friends just aren't as attentive anymore. Your list hasn't been growing much, or maybe there's more competition for different types of events in the area. But everybody goes through a rough patch when it comes to audience, and they find themselves having to work really hard to achieve the numbers that they once had. And that, for me, is the opportunity to scale back and say, you know what? This is our hobby. This is not our job. How do we keep this fun? How do we retrain our audience to start respecting our SVPs? How do we get them to actually show up? Well, we make it more limited. We make it more exclusive. And we stay small for a period of time. And we only work with artists who are coming through that don't have high demands for their shows. There's some artists, you're not going to get Sean Mullins to play in your house for a couple $100. It's not going to happen, even on a Monday night. But there is incredible, incredible talent out there that will. And you have the opportunity to tap into that. And with the 10-10 concerts, you can set reasonable expectations, not work so damn hard to fill seats, and have an amazing time. Well, for me, house concerts remind me of why I do music.